Clash Artifacts of Chaos is one of those games that's almost custom tailored for Review the Meta. Weird ass sequel to a weird ass series of games that like only 5 people seem to remember. Middling review scores with apparently none coming from any major review outlet. All the videos I could find reviewing this were from smaller channels here and there, and a few of them had only heard about it from the Iron Pineapple playing SoulsLike's videos. I had no clue this game existed. I hadn't heard of it either. It was just there, on sale on the PlayStation Store. I stumbled upon it while looking for a couple of games to treat myself with for the Christmas. It instantly caught my eye. I mean, look at this dude. You get to play as this penis-headed looking goon and run around beating up everyone with your bare fists? Where do I sign up? I don't know if any of you are like me, but do you ever see a game that no matter what the score is, what the reviews say, you just know you're going to love it? That is Clash Artifacts of Chaos in a nutshell. This game is easily the biggest surprise hidden gem of all of 2023. I do not know how so few people were talking about it. I would have expected its aesthetic and soundtrack to receive at least one Art Direction Game Award nomination somewhere, but nope, nothing. Just me and maybe a dozen other YouTubers, max, even mentioning it. I don't get it, because this game is awesome. Normally, I would compare my experience to the reviews or try to make a case for how it's better than the meta. This barely even applies in this case. Meta has 25 reviews across 3 platforms and OpenCritic has 22. Needless to say, I don't think this video is going to get all that many views, but if I could get one person to check the game out, I did my job. From the looks of it, this is one of those games that has a small but dedicated fan base. Most of the positive reviews were from fans of the previous games, Zeno Clash 1 and 2. Artifacts of Chaos is a prequel, I think? I don't know. Never played the other 2 games. I hadn't even heard of them before this, but I'm probably gonna check them out now if they're anything as weird or visually stimulating as this. That's what got me through the door in the first place. This beautiful art style, these gorgeous environments, and bonkers character designs. Once I was through the door, once inside, I was treated to a fun and engaging combat system, a sprawling world that was a joy to explore, and a sad and touching story. You are Pseudo, maybe a monk, maybe a hermit. I have no idea what he's supposed to be. You come across this little fuzzball bird thing named Boy. Don't know if he has an actual name. That's just what they call him the entire time. You two embark on a journey to dump Boy off on somebody. Anybody. Doesn't matter who. Pseudo doesn't care, as long as it's not him that has to deal with Boy anymore. This very quickly goes wrong, and they both end up being hunted. Along the way, they form a bond. There are some underlying themes of order and chaos, the law, the nature of freedom, things which I am neither adequately well educated nor intelligent enough to delve into too deeply. I'll leave the think pieces on the philosophies of these games to better YouTubers than myself. But at its core, the story's not all that dissimilar to what Joel and Ellie go through in The Last of Us, albeit with a slightly different conclusion. Both characters are well written, well acted, their interactions were interesting, sometimes humorous. It was compelling watching them grow closer throughout the game. Little random conversations where you see boys' innocence and confusion slowly breaking Pseudo down. There's a couple of rather memorable scenes in the game that I don't want to spoil for anyone that hasn't played it, but there's one in particular, about halfway through the game, where Pseudo finally breaks and realizes Boy isn't just a burden to be unloaded onto someone else. There's a change to the graphical presentation just as this haunting musical score starts to play. All of the elements of the game come together perfectly, and I was completely hooked. This game is something special. It all builds up to an ending that doesn't go how you'd typically expect. It's kinda heartbreaking, yet remains consistent with Pseudo's established personality. He goes from being this gruff loner that just wants to fight everyone to being pretty much the exact same guy that now wants to fight everyone for the right reasons. Luckily for him, there are plenty of fights to get into. Combat itself is also woven into the lore in the form of the one law, the only law of the land. A ritual that the participants must adhere to its terms if invoked. From a narrative perspective, it sends you out, searching the land for certain artifacts required before you could face the main antagonist. As a gameplay mechanic, it's a little dice minigame where the winner gets to activate the modifier they'd chosen. Things like getting a free hit before the fight starts, or being tethered to a chain, limiting range of motion. Before certain fights, you can initiate the ritual. You both roll your dice, then use different stamps that affect the values of the dice. When you both run out of stamps, the higher number wins. It's a neat little concept, gets more elaborate as you progress. There's some good strategy to it, learning when to use your stamps to maximize their effectiveness. Although, this is where my only real complaint about the gameplay lies, and the only thing I agree with from the negative reviews. It felt unbalanced in its implementation. I'd be playing along, games felt fair, win a few, lose a few. Then you hit a point where you can't win no matter what. The opponent has more and better stuff. You hit a certain checkpoint, get better dice, open up more stamp slots, feels fine again. Then you hit another wall. This kept happening until almost the end of the game, when you're pretty much maxed out. Fortunately, the game can be skipped most of the time, so if it's not your thing, you don't have to engage with it all that often. It's a shame because I thought the dice game was really cool. I liked how it changes the dynamic of a fight, infusing a touch of extra chaos to encounters that can already get pretty hectic. The combat was definitely a mixed bag in reviews, with some finding it tedious or frustrating, and others really getting into it. I am 100% in the latter camp. On the surface, it's fairly straightforward. Standard attack that combos, various special moves, running and jump attack, a dodge that also transitions into an attack, parry, regular stuff. There is a focus on melee, punches, kicks, different stances you can unlock, with their own unique feel. Nothing special, but there is a surprising depth to its application. The camera sticks real close to the character, making fights with multiple enemies, which is frequent, a strategic battle. Keeping track of their location, their spacing, learning when to strike and what attack to use, monitoring the passive stamina-based blocking system, which renders any button mashing a death sentence, running around, waiting for an opening, sneaking in a quick combo followed by a dodge counter, getting an enemy out of position just long enough to hit him with a special. There's this stick and move quality to the combat. The enemies can also hit each other, adding another strategic layer to a fight. You also have this ultimate attack, which puts you into first-person mode when you fill up the meter, doing massive damage that ends with a devastating finisher. This was an excellent equalizer, melting an opponent's health bar, wiping one of them out in seconds, evening the odds a bit in fights where you're usually outnumbered. There's great enemy variety, keeping fights fresh and challenging the entire game. I absolutely loved the combat. It did take me a little while to understand the timing of the button presses on the dodge counters, making a few of the early fights a bit frustrating and one-dimensional, where I was spamming the running attack just to survive. But once I got that down, combat started to open up and flow for me. I grew to appreciate its high level of customization. I'd look forward to exploring a new region, searching for another totem that granted me a new stance or special, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, tinkering with different combinations to see what works best. Exploration also rewards you with lots of upgrade materials for these, along with a bunch of resources to trade for things like armor sets, weapons, dice game upgrades, or to use as ingredients to beef up your health flasks. Wandering around these twisty, turny areas that loop back and forth into each other always yielded something. They're like knotted up balls of yarn that needed to be untangled. I really enjoyed this approach to level design. However, this was a huge point of contention in reviews. A lot of people complained that it was confusing and they didn't know where to go or how to get there, blaming the game's Souls-like nature for this. The game doesn't give you any direction on where to go, but it's not like the path forward is ambiguous or cryptic. All the regions branch out from the central hub town in a pretty obvious way. Even the individual areas, for as loopy as they can get, have indicators within them letting you know you're headed the right way. There is this day-night mechanic where certain areas can only be accessed at night that are occasionally required in order to progress. You learn this within the first hour or so, since it's the only way to get to the hub town in the first place. I can't see this being a cause for confusion. Besides that, seeing those thorns blocking your path already motivates you to explore them, even if they aren't a part of the critical path, if only to see what's on the other side. And the game rewards you for doing so, either with an armor piece for your knight form, high-level upgrade parts for your moves and stances, or some mini-bosses that only come out at night. I do not recall a single moment where I got lost or didn't know where to go. I don't know if some of these reviewers have perhaps grown a bit accustomed to having waypoints holding their hands, showing them where to go next. I do not agree at all with the level design being confusing. I'm also not entirely sure if I agree with it being a Souls-like. I'm sure you could call it that if you stretch the definition of what a Souls-like is. The similarities are there. The way the levels loop back and forth into themselves. The doors that don't open from this side. How the regions are interconnected in one way or the other. I suppose. The checkpoint system with the campsites where you level up and replenish your health flasks. Sure, why not? The day-night death mechanic where if you die, you revive at night and have to recover your body, or else you lose your progress back to the previous checkpoint at whatever campsite you were last at. I mean, I get it. My problem with this is it didn't feel like a Souls-like as I played it. I won't deny that they adopted some design philosophies from those games, but to me this felt more like an old-school 3D action game from the days before it would auto-save every few steps and death had greater consequence. Bonfires and shortcuts do not necessarily make a game a Souls-like. There's a certain mood and atmosphere unique to a Souls-like, with some recent examples being Lies of P or Lords of the Fallen, the new one. In that regard, Clash Artifacts of Chaos does not qualify. This is more akin to something I would have played on the PS2 or original Xbox. The Wild West days of gaming when wacky, kind of experimental games like this would have thrived, but now they get lost in a sea of samey titles. I'm glad I took a chance on this. Even though it was a bit janky at times, and it did take me a bit to get the hang of the combat system, it was a memorable title that I will keep coming back to every couple of years. Thoroughly underrated, tragically disregarded, I could not possibly recommend this game more.